So, what can you and I take away from the episode with Paul? I think, first of all, when it comes to LLM projects, I see them more as regular software projects rather than AI projects. Because the part of AI where you actually first have to go out, collect a lot of data, label it, and then you start with iteration, like all of that is stripped away. And also, a lot of the iteration is stripped away because you can immediately start putting something in production by using LLMs, which are very generalistic. So they can do a lot of tasks with a high degree of accuracy without any training data. So you actually can get something in the hands of the user faster and get data that way, and then improve it as you collect more real world data. So for LLM projects, I think it makes even more sense that you start simple, iterate fast, and get something out as fast as possible. And his process is basically first set up the basics, like a Python template, UV, linters, simple CI. I think over time, most developers build their own templates or like starter packs for each project. And I have my own. I think they're up on my GitHub if you want to check them out, which basically includes UV for and rough for linting, type for type checking now, and also a few GitHub workflows and YAML files for different things. So, for example, automatically pushing to AWS, automatically pushing to SST, automatically pushing to modal, and then start to focus on the interface. So basically build an end-to-end flow before optimizing it. And after that, modularize aggressively so you keep the core logic separate from the different tools and frameworks or integrations you're building so you can swap them out easily. And a mental model, which I like to use, is okay, where do I expect the most flux? And I think like LLM integrations into the different model providers is always something where I expect the most flux because I want to easily be able to switch out Anthropic for OpenAI for my own model. So I always put these into a completely custom model, which I can call from different points in the flow or different points in my code base. And the fourth point of him is like expect refactoring. So because patterns often emerge through iteration, the right interfaces emerge through iteration, and you're never truly done. Expect to refactor and do it aggressively. And every time you're implementing a feature, I like to ask, hey, is this easier when I first refactor a large part of the code base and then implement it? And in a lot of cases, this is actually faster. So basically, the time to refactor plus do the change is often faster than doing the change without the refactor because you have a less complex integration into the system. The second part on our second takeaway is basically frameworks versus custom code. He advocates like using frameworks for like quick prototyping and validating ideas in 1 to 2 hours. I actually disagree on that. I think, especially with coding assistants, I would stay away from frameworks because usually, like, even if you want to implement newer methods out of research papers, most LLMs nowadays can one shot those. And I wouldn't even touch frameworks anymore because they just detach you from the application logic. And I would rather build it from scratch and debug the LLM code because it forces me to understand what's happening rather than using a framework which abstracts away most of the logic from me. And that's on top of the knowledge that I will throw it away at a later point. So anything like where you have production systems, database integrations, complex workflows, you can't use any of those. And I think what is an interesting perspective is Paul's stance on like he sees LangChain and similar tools as low code solutions, so good for prototyping, but throw them away from serious projects, which I agree with. But I wouldn't use them for prototyping as well. My take, what we talked about in the episode, I really like temporal, restate, debose, these new durable execution frameworks, because I think they abstract away pieces which you should understand, but you don't really have to understand deeply. That's usually the infrastructure components, the communication components, message queues, and things like that, um, which are good things to abstract away. But the core business logic you're implementing, you should never abstract away. And this is what these frameworks like LangChain are doing. On his fine tuning question, I think his 4 criteria were really good. Like, when should you fine tune? You should fine tune when you hit these 4 criteria. First, you are already in production for months. Secondly, you have abundant high quality training data. Thirdly, you have task specific requirements that regular LLMs just can't match. Or 4, you want to have a competitive advantage. I would add another one. You have privacy issues. This is something we often have in the EU. So in our project, this is the most common reason why you want custom LLMs, because you're training on sensitive data or you're using them with sensitive data. So you want them hosted on your own GPUs, on your own clouds. So you need custom LLMs, which are actually get close to the performance of something more general like OpenAI and Anthropic. But yeah, on top of that, it just adds complexity. You have like massive infrastructure. The costs are really high usually. The development cycles get way slower because iterating on models versus iterating on prompts is a massive difference. And you need to have a pretty solid AI organization already in place to actually be able to still go quick enough. You will never go as fast as someone who just uses OpenAI, but to go like decently fast, like iterate on weekly model releases or something like that, you need to have automatic training, automatic deployments, automatic rollbacks for the AI models in place, which is something that most companies just won't have. I think as a last point, his learning takeaways are really interesting. We talked a little bit about just in time and just in case learning. So just in case basically means that you learn for the case of needing something. Just in time is you learn because you need it right now. And to separate the two, he goes really hard onto projects to drive immediate learning. But I think Paul is in a different situation than most of us because he's mostly an educator. In our cases, I would probably go with something, go deep on the fundamentals. Like, I really like to re-implement things which most people just use. So for example, I re-implemented the HTTP library in Go because it really forces you to spend a lot of time on networking and how HTTP works. And then once you have that understanding, you never need to re-implement it again, or it wasn't even thought to be like a production use case. But I gained like a lot of understanding of how HTTP, the protocol, works. And you, from then on, you probably don't need to do it ever again because you understand more than most people. And you get a way deeper respect for the different libraries. And the other part, the just-in-time learning, I agree with him. Learn as you go. Anything that isn't really in the fundamentals, in important skills that transfer across different projects, learn it just in time. Just take the bet on yourself and don't be on that hamster wheel that you continuously feel like you need to stay up to date. You need to be up to date with the latest stuff and you need to master everything. Yes, these are the takeaways. So to summarize again, first, build incrementally. So start with a naive implementation, but a full one, which basically implements the full feature. Get it into the hands of users or beta users as quickly as possible, and then refine through use. Secondly, avoid the framework lock-in. So write your own core logic layer, your database integrations. Thirdly, delay complexity. So avoid fine-tuning agents or RAG until absolutely necessary. If you can't do something in a single prompt, just use a single prompt. Fourth, learn pragmatically. Let the projects you're working on drive the learning and not the hype cycles. And yeah, just remember, the LLM space isn't figured out yet. And I think that's what makes it really interesting. So it's like, at the moment, a really interesting balance between software engineering and research. So there's a lot to still figure out. We are still really early. And I think it's really important to remind us of that, because the space moves so fast. So we always feel like we are behind, but truly we aren't. Catch you next week. That's it for today. Let's quickly talk about our new deal. I'm committed to bringing you detailed and practical insights about AI engineering, development, and implementation. In return, I have two simple requests. First of all, hit subscribe and like right now to help me understand what content resonates with you. And if you found value in this podcast, share it with one other developer or tech professional who's working with AI to help it grow, so we can build this podcast together.